Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unfucking Your CX. Everyone knows me, your host, Zach Hamilton, but let's just be frank. What you really care about is who's in the hot seat and what are you going to learn today? And I am so excited for Chris because Chris and I hit it off. And quite frankly, I think this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation
Hope so.
for some of our listeners because it's going to be a real conversation. So, Chris, welcome to the hot seat, brother.
Thank you, Zach. First of all, let me just say I'm excited. I've listened to your stuff. I love the approach that you're taking because I think it's needed. So I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I always like to kind of set the scene, right? Where are we having this conversation? Is it at your local coffee shop? Is it, at your favorite pub, at a restaurant, maybe on a walk? Where are we at?
Well, I'm at my house, so that's probably not as exciting as some of the other folks that you're there. But I will say I live outside of Atlanta and it's a gloomy, rainy day here. So this is a great place for me to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, no worries. I'm actually at my favorite coffee shop sitting outside close to my kids' school so I could easily get over there. But remind me, what part of Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm north of Atlanta. So I'm up in kind of the North Georgia mountain areas, about an hour outside.
So like LJ.
A little farther, more like Dahlonega, Helen.
Yeah.
Maybe some people know Helen. It's a little cool little
Yep.
German town. So I'm up in that neck of the woods.
Oh, very cool. I love North Georgia. So we lived in Kennesaw. So I love North Georgia. I love the base of the Appalachians. Like so
Beautiful.
beautiful, dude.
It's
So
beautiful. You can
beautiful.
see a little bit of the greenery out of my window here. So it's
Yeah,
a
I can
beautiful
see
day.
it. I can see it. Dude, good for you. Chris, you've seen it all. You're a practitioner by trade. You've also helped brands. You just dropped a book based on all of the learnings of being in the trenches. What's the topic we're unfucking today? What's making you
Yeah.
cringe the most right now?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a couple things, Zach. I mean, 30 plus years in retail. I've had the privilege of working for some companies like Target, Home Depot, Toys R Us, always on the operation service side of the business. And so I consider myself a student of service. I'm passionate about it, right? If you are offering a service or a product and you're a brand, you owe it to those individuals that are spending their money with you to be appreciative of them and to create a culture where people actually want to keep coming in and coming back and doing business with you. My frustration, and this is what we're talking about today, is I've seen probably for the last 10 years, but most notably for the last 5, and I think COVID played a lot into this, is this erosion or degradation of customer service across all companies. I mean, we're just seeing it go in the opposite direction. And okay, that's reality. That's where we are. Where I get frustrated though is, and you and I've talked about this, is there's a lot of CX influencers out there and people that have a great message and certainly are probably qualified to have the conversation. But where I get frustrated is it's just the same stuff over and over again. That's all that we're hearing.
Mm, mm-mm.
NPS is not a great measurement. You need to build more engagement with your teams. You need to be more friendly. You need to do all of this. And I hear it, and then we go to conferences and I hear the same thing, but I don't see anything getting better. And that's what led me to this book, is spending the last 5.5 years deep diving in my previous company with a variety of companies and really digging into, okay, so why is your service culture broken? Right. And I can tell you this with the utmost confidence, has nothing to do with how you're measuring it. It has nothing to do ultimately with the training that you're giving. I mean, it's important stuff. But at the end of the day, the problem is the relationship we have with each other. And that's why I wrote this book called The Villain Trap, because it's something that we all fall into every single day, even outside of our work lives. We fall into it. And where I get really concerned is over the last 5 years, I've seen this chasm growing between people where there's a trust issue. We no longer trust each other. We think we're better than everybody else because we're measuring ourselves with material things and not how we're helping. We're not open to assisting anymore. And so, hence the name, what we end up doing is we ended up creating villains because it's so hard for us to accept our responsibility and our accountability in the decisions we make. And while this book is really more leadership focused, the tie-ins to customer service are there. And I just dropped an article on LinkedIn today, so maybe your listeners can check it out, about how the villain trap specifically impacts customer service. And there's a lot to unpack there, man. But that's what I want to talk to you about today.
Yeah, I think it's so timely too. I mean, I remember Brene Brown did a podcast not too long ago, might have been a year or two ago now, but she was talking about where we've become as a society is along this villain trap thing, but we start to form bonds with people, not over general same interests, but over gossiping about people and villainizing people,
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly right.
Um, and I think about the political environment and where it's at. I think about everything. Like it is everywhere. And it definitely is showing up in retail. Like you, retailer at heart,
Yeah,
right? Spent 15 years in retail, not as long as you. But Chris, one thing that I'm seeing, it is harder than hell to get help
it is.
in any retail store right now.
Yeah, it is. And look, there was just an article today, and not to pick on any particular brand, but Target has been in the news, and that's my old company. I was there for 15 years. I loved Target. But I think what you're seeing the villain trap really in full play because and the way that it works, just so that your readers understand it, what it is we have trouble accepting ownership and accountability for our actions and decisions. And so it becomes easier to villainize or pin that blame on somebody else to say it's not my fault, Zach, it's your fault because you didn't do these things. And that's a I like to refer to it sometimes as a bit of a drug because when you do that and you blame and you villainize somebody else, you instantly relieve yourself of the responsibility and the discomfort. And it's a very slippery slope because once you do it once, it feels so good, you're going to do it again and you're going to do it again,
Yeah.
you're doing it again. And I think that's what's happening, especially in the retail world, is leadership has villainized employees. Employees villainize leadership. And then what happens is employees start to villainize the customer. And the customer villainizes the
Yeah.
employee and villainizes the brand. And it's this vicious cycle. So no matter what you do, you're never going to achieve what I like to talk about as a mode of loyalty. It's like how you build that real connection when everybody hates each other. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about how, before we get to the player tips, let's talk about how this shows up, right? So let me put yourself in the minds of a customer, right? You've got to call customer service. I don't know about you, but there's been some times where I've psyched myself up of, I mean, I'm going to have to get into an argument with them just to get my issue solved. And so now I am completely psyching or even gearing myself up of this is going to be a battle,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm already having these preconceived notions of this person isn't going to be able to help me out. They're going to be a worthless POS, and I'm going to have to go to battle stations to get
That's
this
right.
done.
That's exactly right. So there's five stages to the trap itself, to the villain trap. And you just talked about number one, which is a trigger or discomfort. So you already set yourself up when you're called. I'm probably going to be on hold for 20 minutes. I'm probably going to talk to somebody that's in another country and I don't understand them and they're probably going to give me a hassle. So you're setting that up in your mind. And the first moment that you have that call and you experience that trigger or that discomfort, that's where the trap begins to open. The next step is victim reflex. So that's when you start to justify, you know what? I knew this was going to happen. I knew you were going to be the
Mm-hmm.
problem. And so that's when the justification comes in. And then the third part of it is your story starts to form. It's not me, it's this employee, it's this company. And now you've named your villain. You are the villain, right? And then you look for validation. Well, it's happened 4 times before. I love to use an analogy where people will go back through their emails. I
Oh
remember when
yeah,
you said this. And then the last thing is what happens, it reinforces your behavior. And suddenly you're treating people differently, you're treating that particular company differently, your employee differently, doesn't matter. Those are the five stages of the trap that open because when we get to that point where something happens that and it's cognitive dissonance, right? It's that I expect something to be this way and when it is not, it becomes a trigger. And that's where you have to be very careful because that's really where that trap begins
yeah,
to open.
yeah. I love that. I loved how you just walked us through it, right? Because I'm even thinking in my mind, oh my gosh, I've done that. I've done that, right? And if you think about the employees showing up, it's like I'll never forget when I was when I was a store manager at Aaron's, and our delivery team just we forgot a couple steps when we were installing something. And so the customer called in and said, "Hey, look, this isn't installed correctly. Can you please send someone back out there?" And immediately The employees were like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's never done this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starting to form it. So
That's
I
right.
went out there with them, and guess what? She was right.
She was
We
right.
we just skipped a couple steps.
Yeah.
And look, that was human error.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, no one was hurt. Everyone was safe. Like nothing drastic happened. But because we didn't want to own,
Yes.
holy smokes, we forgot a couple steps and then we didn't go back and check our
That's right.
work. She's at fault. But then what I loved how, when you and I were talking a couple days ago, talk to us about how this is showing up from an executive point of view as they're talking about employees.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there was a I just saw an article where the CEO of Ralph Lauren came out and he was talking about how he gives feedback. And one of the things he said, and I'm sure his intentions were good in that article, was sometimes you have to hit employees with a 2x4 to get them to understand. That little, whether he was intentionally being disparaging or not, that opens the trap because I'm now an employee of Ralph Lauren and I read that article and that article says I got to hit employees over the head 2x4. So what happens for me? Trap opens up. I don't like that. So I start forming a story. You know what? He thinks we're stupid. He thinks we can't understand what he's saying. And then the trap begins to open for that particular employee. And now they start justifying, right? They start going back going, well, he said this in an article or I was in a meeting with him. And then you have that villain trap in full effect. And now I'm not interested in working for you, but I have to have a
Yeah.
job. So I'm going to do the bare minimum when I'm there. And it's those little moments. And what you said was a perfect example, Zach, because we have such a hard time owning the fact that we make mistakes or we can make mistakes because our ego needs to be protected. The fact that I did something wrong, that's discomforting to me. So if I can shift that blame to somebody else, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And in
Yeah.
your case, and look, I've run call centers and I've run people, and I can't tell you how many times, well, they don't know what they're talking about. The customer does, or it's not right, or that couldn't be really what's happening. So you're lying or you're not. And that just creates that animosity versus us thinking, you know what? Yeah, this customer has a problem. I'm going to take care of it. If we screwed up, we screwed up. We're going to own it and we're going to take care of it.
Yeah. And it's so, I want to jump back really quick when it comes to the executive piece. It also goes back to like what Brene Brown was saying is now we start to squire. We start to tell stories in our
Yeah.
heads and to
Yes.
validate. And the way that this shows up, if you think about it, to your point, employee morale drops. They're going to do the bare minimum to take care of customers. So that upsell, cross sell initiative that you just had in your retail store,
Yeah.
throw that out to wash because they're
Yeah.
not going to go above and beyond to serve that
Yeah.
customer, right? And then if you think about from a customer experience, when your employee has had enough and their CEO's bad mouthing you, and the customer's the one that unfortunately it's taken out on because I'm having a bad day at work. Well, guess what? I just churned that customer. That customer's not coming back. Our customer lifetime value decreased. And quite frankly, they probably is going to put it all over their social media. So
That's right.
now that advocacy piece has gone the other way
That's right.
that you wanted. So Chris, this we got to unfuck this. So what's the first player tip?
Yeah, well, I would tell you. So in the book, I give an outline of something called the ownership cycle, right? Which is your opportunity to really kind of understand how you keep yourself out of this trap. Which is, I'm going to tell all of your listeners, it is not a perfect science. It's not something that never goes away. It's something you're going to have to think about. But number one is you have to be aware when that trigger starts and that little discomfort pops up and you start to know that's when the trap is opening. So this is when if you can get yourself in a place where you recognize it, this is where you can shift that monologue from judgment to curiosity, right? And you feel that in your chest, I'm going down. The second thing you do, and this is the most important part, is you reframe. So instead of creating a story that villainizes, you ask yourself the five most powerful words I can think of. What else could be true? And you begin to do that. And you say, you know what? I'm not going to create this story and go down this path. I'm going to say, you know what? Maybe something else is happening here. What else could be true? Right? The third thing you do is you own your part of the story. In the book, I outline a thing with my grandfather where he once told me that you are part of the problem. Whether you want to believe it or not, you are absolutely part of the problem. So the third thing and the most important thing is you have to own that. You have to own the fact that you probably didn't handle something well, that you made a mistake, that you're not perfect, right? You're not taking responsibility for the whole situation. You're just owning your part. And when you own that part, it changes the dynamic you have with your employees, right? Because now instead of saying, hey, Zach, you should have done this, which puts people on the defensive. You're now saying, hey, Zach, I got to be honest with you. I don't think I communicated enough or gave you enough information for you to be successful. I'm owning it. And then that opens the door for you to own it. And then the last part is just, you got to take action. You have to take a concrete step towards repairing and realigning with that person to build the relationship. But I will say this in conclusion, a relationship that's built on trust and honesty and openness, those are the kind of relationships you want to have. And if you have those with your employees, I guarantee you the whole dynamic about how you run your company, how you see service begins to change.
Dude, that's so good. I was just thinking, though, man, it's so hard.
It's hard. It's
That
hard.
is so
Can I
hard.
tell you this, Zach? It's like there's a bonus chapter in the book called The Villain Trap at Home because it doesn't just happen at work. It happens in our personal lives. It happens with your children. It happens with your spouse. It happens when you're driving in the car. It doesn't matter where you go. We're constantly forming stories that protect our ego and alleviate that discomfort that we're feeling. And we've got to take a step back and own it because everybody's talking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to change things and change the world and take jobs. And I agree, there's going to be a lot of change. But I will say this, and this is not to put too fine a point on it. If we can't find a way to get back to having trustworthy, normal relationships with each other where we're not judging, where we're not forming these stories, we're doomed. And that's the
Yeah.
essence of this book, not to be too dramatic, but we've got to get back into that place again where we trust people, where we enjoy people, where most importantly, as a leader, we go back to being servant leaders. That's why we're there. We're there to help and nurture and grow the people that we're leading.
Yeah, I think that's so spot on. I think as you're kind of talking through this, if you're an executive leader listening, which I know we have a lot of execs that listen, I challenge you to go to glassdoor.com and look at your brand and look at how your employees give feedback about your brand. And now you can come up with a story of,
And
oh,
you
well,
will.
they're just bitter because they
And you
left and
will.
said,
Yeah. Yeah.
but look at how they, one, talk about
Yeah.
the customers,
That's right.
two, talk about leadership. There is truth in that. Regardless of the story that you want to make up about a bitter, disgruntled employee, there's truth in those numbers. And
Always.
if you're an employee, I challenge you to your point, take stock of how you interact with your customers.
That's right. Yeah.
Realize it's becoming a trigger, and the
Yeah.
customers not at fault.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
not.
they're not at fault. And how you see your company, right? Because the employees, it's easy to villainize the company. They don't pay me enough. They don't do this. They don't do that. And those, fine, those are your feelings. But take a step back and say, why did I take the job in the first place if I didn't feel like I was getting paid enough, right? Like there's ownership that we all are responsible for. Chapter 9 in the book, Zach, is even if you don't think you lead this way, if you have ever led a team of people, I can confidently tell you, you have been a villain in somebody's story, without a
Oh,
doubt.
trust me. I think I'm a villain in a lot of stories for sure. Chris, it has been amazing. I want to just dig in even more. But before I do, let me read the book. One, for all of our listeners, I'll drop a link to Chris's book in the meeting notes so you can grab a copy too. And then Chris,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, the book is available on Amazon. This is the book, and it's available in a Kindle version and a hardback. There'll be an audio version of it coming in probably 30 days. I'm on LinkedIn, all over on LinkedIn, Chris Gillen. Please follow me. I put out a lot of content on this subject, and I love to talk about it. Go to LinkedIn and hit me up, or you can always send me a direct email if you want at chris@collarbaseai.com is my email address, and I love to talk about this. Read the book. You want to debrief and you want to talk, reach out to me.
Love it. Well, thanks, Chris, for coming to the hot seat. Don't be a stranger. Come back again.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Cheers, bud.